Welcome to World News, a daily international news coverage on MNB World. I'm Batsirin Namshir. On News Mongolia today, foreign ministers of Mongolia and the Kingdom of Spain hold official talks. Global food security is being compromised due to climate change. 7,676 cases of drunk driving have been recorded in the past 3 months. For the news, stay tuned. On April 30th, during her official visit to the Kingdom of Spain, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mongolia, Batsitsig Batmu, held official talks with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, European Union and Cooperation of the Kingdom of Spain, José Manuel Alvarez. The two sides discussed the expansion of Mongolian-Spanish relations, which are based on the shared values of democracy, human rights and the rule of law, with economic content and the effective implementation of development policies. Minister Batsitsig introduced Mongolia's development policies and major objectives, underlining the extensive potential for mutually beneficial cooperation between Mongolia and the Kingdom of Spain. The two sides agreed to expand bilateral relations in investment, the economy, trade, agriculture, light industry, tourism and education. The two parties also affirmed the mutual commitment to facilitating a favorable legal environment for intensifying cooperation, particularly to finalize agreements on air relations, the mutual recognition of driving licenses, and visa exemption for holders of diplomatic and official passports. Minister Batsitsig introduced Mongolia's foreign policy and its priorities. The two sides agreed to work closely within the framework of initiatives put forward by Mongolia at the international level, specifically on ensuring preparations and successful outcomes for the World Women Entrepreneurs Forum, which will be held in Ulaanbaatar in August 2025, and the 17th session of the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, which will be held in Ulaanbaatar in 2026. Highlighting the importance of high-level mutual visits to intensify bilateral relations, the two sides agreed to organize the state visit of the head of state of the Kingdom of Spain to Mongolia, the official visit of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Spain to Mongolia, and a political consultative meeting. The ministers signed a memorandum of understanding on cooperation between Mongolia and the Diplomatic School of the Kingdom of Spain on preparing and training specialists in international relations, Spanish language, and linguistics. The two sides also confirmed their mutual commitment to strengthening cooperation within the framework of the UN and other international organizations and exchanged views on international relations. Amnesty International conducted annual research to prevent and end serious human rights abuses around the world. The organization has released its most recent report on the state of human rights in 150 countries. The report highlights that climate change is intensifying globally and that in many countries, cuts to health and education budgets have deepened poverty and inequality.
According to the report, droughts and other natural disasters caused by climate change, combined with poverty and conflict, are putting hundreds of millions of people around the world at risk of food insecurity. The international report notes that the rapid development of artificial intelligence technology is contributing to greater discrimination, gender inequality, and racial bias. At every COP meeting, there are calls to follow the principle that polluters must pay, and discussions center around the idea that the countries contributing the most to pollution should provide financial support. In recent years, budgets have been cut, and these cuts are being made in sectors that ensure the realization of people's economic and social rights, such as social protection, healthcare, and education. International organizations have conducted research in 6 key areas regarding the human rights situation in Mongolia, including the right to freedom of expression and the rights of detained individuals. The report notes that mining operations have negatively impacted herders' access to drinking water, land rights, and livelihoods. Dust pollution caused by mining is reducing the quality of livestock wool, which puts herders at risk of being pushed away from their traditional way of life. Focusing more specifically on the right to freedom of expression, Article 13 and 14 of the Criminal Code includes a provision on spreading false information. This clause is currently being used to investigate journalists and other people who criticize those in power. This research is being conducted simultaneously in 150 countries. Following a detailed plan, we go through a 22-stage process to produce the final report. For the Human Rights and Technology section, we emphasize that while technology is highly significant for national development, the economy, youth and children, and education and knowledge, it is equally important that we all recognize the associated risks. The report also addressed the need for preventive measures. Amnesty International holds advisory status on human rights issues with the United Nations. Along with this report, it will provide recommendations to governments and introduce human rights trends to civil society organizations and non-governmental organizations.
Drunk driving remains a critical threat in Mongolia, with 7,676 violations and 122 deaths recorded in just the first 3 months of this year. Despite stricter laws requiring trials for all drunk driving offenses and imposing prison sentences for fatal accidents, authorities warn that a lack of legal awareness and personal responsibility continues to fuel this crisis, turning reckless drivers into deadly dangers on the road.
Every day, tragic accidents are caused by people who get behind the wheel under the influence of alcohol, endangering and destroying their lives and the lives of others. Nationwide, an average of 400 to 600 people lose their lives each year due to traffic accidents. In just the first 3 months of this year, 7,676 cases of drunk driving violations were registered, and accidents involving drunk drivers resulted in the deaths of 122 people. Authorities have issued a stern reminder that drunk driving is the gravest violation a driver can commit.
Driving under the influence means deliberately participating in traffic while creating the real possibility of causing harm, threats, and violence against others, property, and lives. Recently, a case involving a 4-vehicle collision was concluded. One person died and another was severely injured. As part of the perpetrator's sentencing, their right to drive was restricted for up to 3 years.
For a country with just over 3.5 million people, losing over 600 people annually to traffic accidents is no small loss.
In just one night of nationwide inspections, 150 to 200 drunk drivers are detected. Compared to accidents involving sober drivers, drunk driving incidents cause significantly greater material damage. Drunk driving violations in the province haven't decreased this year. So far, 445 cases of drunk driving have been recorded. Compared to the same period last year, this is a 63% increase, or an increase of 172 cases.
Even though changes have been made to the legal consequences for causing accidents under the influence of alcohol or narcotics, the number of accidents has not declined. This highlights the urgent need to address not only legal responsibility, but also to influence the public's sense of awareness and accountability.
Previously, if someone was caught drunk driving, they would simply have their driver's license suspended and pay a fine, and that was the end of it. People expect to face only that level of consequences again. This reflects a lack of legal education. Due to the lack of sufficient legal education and awareness, people's actions are now reaching the level of criminal offenses, which leads to facing criminal liability.
гэмтрийн шинжтэй үлд.
According to the law on violations, drivers caught driving under the influence would be fined 400,000 MNT and have their driving privilege suspended for 1 year. Back then, district-level inspectors would handle these cases. Under the amended law, all cases involving drunk driving must now be resolved through court proceedings, regardless of whether it's a first-time or repeat offense. Everyone must go through the courts.
If a person driving under the influence causes the death of another, they face a penalty of 5 to 8 years in prison and restricted freedom of movement for 1 to 5 years. Irresponsible actions of a drunk driver are weighed against the victim's right to life. However, lawyers have pointed out that existing legislation is insufficient, and this inadequacy is one of the reasons why drunk driving continues to occur.
You're watching News Mongolia. Now let's take a look at currency exchange rates provided by Mongol Bank. Now let's take a look at international news from our partner agencies. Tensions between Russia and Ukraine escalated further as Moscow claimed it shot down a Ukrainian fighter jet and advanced in Kharkiv, while Kiev reported ongoing battles in Russia's Kursk region and a targeted strike that allegedly killed a top Russian general.
Russia said on Tuesday that its forces had shot down a Ukrainian fighter jet, while Ukraine on the same day reported continued fighting in Russia's Kursk region. In its daily briefing, the Russian Defense Ministry said that its forces repelled multiple attacks by the Ukrainian army and launched multiple offensives in the directions of Sumy, Kharkiv, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson in the past 24 hours. The ministry also said that the Russian Air Defense Forces downed a Ukrainian Su-27 fighter jet and 189 drones. The Russian forces captured the Doroshovka settlement in the Ukraine's Kharkiv region, it said. Also on Tuesday, the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces reported 178 battles in the frontline areas, with Ukrainian forces repelling Russian attacks in directions including Pokrovsk and continuing fighting in Russia's Kursk region. The Ukrainian Air Force, missile forces, and artillery targeted 16 Russian personnel, weapon, and military equipment concentration areas, destroying an anti-aircraft system, the Ukrainian side said. In another development, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Monday that he had listened to the report of the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine on the liquidation of persons from the top command of the Russian armed forces. Several Ukrainian and Russian media outlets reported that the Ukrainian action referred to by Zelensky was the assassination of Lieutenant General Yaroslav Moskalik, deputy head of the main operations directorate of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces. The investigative committee of Russia said on Sunday that it formally charged Ukrainian agent Ignat Kuzin with carrying out a terrorist action last Friday that resulted in the death of Moskalik. The investigative committee said that the suspect had confessed the crime. Kuzin, acting as an agent for the Ukrainian intelligence department, was promised $18,000 for the assassination. According to a previous announcement from the Federal Security Service of the Russian Federation, a car explosion occurred in Balashika of Moscow Oblast on Sunday. The suspect rigged the car with a homemade explosive device from a secret Ukrainian intelligence facility in Moscow Oblast. When Moskalik walked out of the apartment building, the Ukrainian intelligence agency detonated the explosive device remotely in Ukraine, killing Moskalik.
Well, that's all for today. Thank you for staying with us. We'll see you tomorrow with more news and updates. Goodbye.